We need immediate assistance.
Welcome to Nexus Data. We're going to talk about embassies today. Embassies are vessels through which diplomacy is conducted. They are physical manifestations of countries abroad. They are crucial tools in the field of international relations. This can range in size from tiny like UK embassy in Mongolia, which only has a handful of stops, to enormous like the US embassy in Baghdad, a complex physically as large as Vatican City, which reached a peak of 16,000 staff during Iraq War. Big influential countries will have embassies to almost every other country. The US, for example, has diplomatic missions to every UN-recognized country in the world except St. Kitts and Nevis, Bermuda, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Iraq, Bhutan, and North Korea. Smaller, less influential countries, on the other hand, might only have few embassies. Tuvalu, for example, only has diplomatic mission to New Zealand, Fiji, Taiwan, and European Union in Belgium. The United Nations in New York. You see, there are embassies to non-state organizations, namely the UN and European Union. You can even have embassies to agencies of UN. There is one US diplomat in Rome with the lengthy of title of United States Ambassador to the United Nations Agency for Food and Agriculture. Even traditionally closed of countries like North Korea represent abroad. The DPRK has embassies in some quiet Western countries like Germany, Sweden, and the UK. These countries also each have embassies in North Korea. Now, part of the way these embassies can exist in even more different and opposing of countries is because of how they are confined in international law. Every UN member state except South Sudan, Palua, and Solomon Island has signed the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. This sets out a number of laws on how embassies work. Perhaps the most significant and well-known is Article 22. The premises of the mission shall be unavailable unless invited by ambassador or their government, any representative of their country's government, be it as a police officer, government official, member of military, or even firefighter, cannot enter the embassy. The Vienna Convention also lays out a few other important rules for embassies. The diplomats and the embassy are exempt from all taxes in the host country. The diplomats are allowed free movement around the host country. An embassy can have diplomatic courier carrying diplomatic bags which cannot be seized or searched. Diplomats are granted diplomatic immunity. The residence of diplomats are also treated as an extension for the embassy and cannot be entered without permission. Diplomats cannot work or earn profit when in their host country, except for the embassy. And then there are plenty of other even more minor rules now. The embassy is not a building, it's a group of people that work inside the building. It's a group of workers that represent the country abroad. Another misconception about embassies buildings are that they are the sovereign territory of their other country to represent. This is not the case. It's also not the case that embassy buildings are in the state of extraterritoriality, that local laws don't apply. There would be the case of the United Nations headquarters or many foreign military bases. In the case of embassy building, it's not that the law of the host country don't apply there. It's just many people that makes up the embassy. Now, diplomats almost always follow the rules of their host country, as failing to do so would be unproductive for the very nature of their job. But when they don't, this can have serious implications. As an example, in April 1984, 2 students in Tripoli, Libya were hanged for publicly opposing Gaddafi. In response to protest was formed by major political opposition group outside the Libyan embassy in London in order from Gaddafi as an individual inside the embassy building fired into the crowd with a machine gun, wounding 11. One of those wounded was Joanna Fletcher, a young policewoman who later died in hospital from her injuries. Within 10 minutes of the shots going off, the embassy building was surrounded by British police, blocking anyone from going in or out. Once it had been confirmed through a forensic autopsy that the shot did indeed come from the embassy, negotiations began. The British tried to get permission to enter the embassy building. You see, only some, but not all of the 30 people in the building were diplomats, meaning that some, if they were found to have committed the crime, could be arrested for it. The Libyans, however, would not grant access. Therefore, after 5 days of surrounding the embassy, the British severed diplomatic relations with Libya, giving them another week to leave the embassy and country. This, you see, is what countries can do when diplomats misbehave. They can't go into the embassy building, they can't arrest diplomats, but they can kick them out of the country. After this incident, diplomatic relations between two countries, London and Libya, did not normalize for decades. And even today in 2019, the case is still actively under investigation, and it's quite possible an arrest could happen in future. Normally, though, embassies are more concerned with building diplomacy. Typically, but not always, embassies are always not headed to define the simplest sense than ambassador are represented in their country, but what that initial varies widely from person to person or post to post. There is often a perception that all that ambassadors do is schmooze and booze, but to be honest, that's the part of the job, that they are to build and maintain the relationship between the two countries, like politically, economically, or otherwise. That's just a part of diplomacy, which what embassy job as a whole is. As I mentioned earlier, the US Embassy in Baghdad, Iraq, ballooned to over 16,000 staff during Iraq War. The embassy building was built in Green Zone, a highly fortified area along the Tigris River in Baghdad. This area, guarded by soldiers and walls more than 9 feet of 3 meters tall, was and still is home to much of the international presence in Baghdad that include embassies of countries like US, UK, Australia, but also some companies. War is big business, and Green Zones was home to small field headquarters for many large international engineering constructions and private military firms contracted to help in the war. That is to say, the Green Zone was primarily home to large group of civilians working in Iraq, which is why it was highly guarded. Given the security threat, the US Embassy that was built to entirely self-sufficient. It has its own generator, it has its own well, own water filter plants, and own sewage plants, its own fire station, and even it has its own internet uplink circumvent the Iraqi network. It has its own phone network, both wired and wireless, which both operate pretty much as if they were in US. They use the area code of New York and Virginia, unlike in most cities where embassy staff just live in a normal housing in the city. This embassy has its own block of fortified apartments. Even during the thick war, the embassy compound had its own swimming pool, tennis courts, fitness centers, department stores, nail salons, and movie theaters. Topping it off, the helicopter pad too, used to get ambassadors and the top diplomats around the country when they don't want to confront in the danger below. The diplomatic serving as a part of the US Embassy Baghdad to get another perk in addition to pool and tennis courts and movie theaters and everything else, that they get more money. You see, when working with the US Foreign Service, and it's often similar when working for other countries' foreign service, you essentially get more money and more foreign a place for you to go. If you are serving pretty much anywhere in North America, West Europe, Australia, and few other assorted countries, you get more bonus. If you serve in a place that has an extreme climate, poor quality of healthcare, high crime, high pollution, or has any other factors that makes it more difficult to live there as a foreigner, you get hardship pay, which is a bonus that range anywhere from 5% to 35%. Now, in the modern age, some have questioned whether embassies still have purpose. 100 years ago, they very much had a purpose, as the communication was difficult, travel was slow, and countries therefore needed someone to go ground who could speak on their behalf to other movement notice. Nowadays, though, messages can be relayed instantaneously through a whole host of means. So what's the point of embassies? Well, ambassadors are not messengers. Ambassadors are representatives. They are there not only to work for their country within the political system, but also to promote it to the public as a increased travel trade with the country. Many argue, in fact, that these small personal relationship of our world's diplomate, tying together countries of hundreds of millions or billions, are more diplomats now than ever. If you want to work as a foreign service, the US Department has an extensive reading list of books that will help you to get the knowledge you need. No matter which country you are from, you can become one. Also, everybody know the killing of Ambassador Stevenson in Benghazi, Libya. So if you want to know more about what's happened in Benghazi and Tripoli, you just have to watch a movie called 13 Hours. It's a documentary movie. I highly recommend you that movie to watch, so you can understand what happened, exactly what happened in the United States Embassy in Tripoli. So that's it for today, and thank you for staying tuned with us. I'll see you in our next episode. Thank you.
Chief, are we expecting any friendlies?
I am not aware of any friendlies.
Let them come. Let them come.
You think they're losing heart?
Everyone over here. Find me every airbase in the area that can reach us.
Find me any quick response teams, any naval carrier battle groups in the vicinity. Now, go.
I hear they have a U.S. SIP team in Croatia.
That's a 2-hour flight.
Sigonella, Aviano, Benghazi. How far is Aviano?
700 miles.
There's an F-16, 365 days, 24/7. It's a quick response base.
Or bring it in from Sigonella. It's a fucking paddle jump from Italy to here.
20 minutes.
I am not requesting firepower. All I want is that you... My authority is that if you don't send, Americans are going to die. Including the one talking to you right now.